Florida Football Talk with Jackie Franchuli. Yes, even in May, we have stuff to talk about. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the Gators, and we do it with Jackie Franchuli right here on Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. So lock it in for the best in debate, discussion, and analysis. Jackie, how you doing today?
I'm well, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Of course, Jackie joins us from Gators territory on Rivals. All right, so nothing going on. Jackie confirmed with me before we started to record, there's nothing going on, nothing to talk about. But we can always make stuff up that's fun to talk about in the off season when the rest of the time we've got too much going on with recruiting and games and coaching changes to talk about fun little frivolous topics like this. So Jackie, you can take it in whatever time duration you want to. So I have people come on here. They do it for the entirety of the program going back to 1893. They do it for the last 20 years. They do it for the last 5 years because that's their scope of reference. What do you think would be for you the best wins for Florida football during whatever time designation? And they don't have to be because they were important. They just meant something to the fan base, meant something to you, or extra exciting, exhilarating, whatever the criteria.
So I've been covering Florida since the 2016 season. And I think the biggest win that I've covered, it doesn't really, it's not like the biggest win in program history or anything like that. But the big win for me is LSU at Baton Rouge in 2016. And the reason why I say that, because there was so much going on in that game. It was the year where they had to move the game and move it to Baton Rouge from Gainesville because of the hurricane. And there was so much talk about that LSU fans were saying that Florida was running scared. There's so much trash talking going on, and they had to move from Gainesville to Baton Rouge. And also for the fact that because Florida beat LSU in Baton Rouge, they also won the SC East and qualified to go to the SC championship game. And they did it in a way where they had a goal line stand to end the game. So it was very exhilarating to be on the field personally when I saw that happen. The fans, the Gator fans were in Baton Rouge, but you know what? I couldn't hear the LSU fans at that point. They were very, very loud. And for the program, it was such a big win. Just because of all the stuff off the field that was going on. I couldn't tell you, I still remember all the trash talking that happened the week of the game. And even after people talking about how bad the hurricane was and how many of the players were affected, there was still so much trash talking on social media. So I think for me, that was the most exhilarating win just because of all the off the field stuff that was going on and for the fact that they qualified for the SC championship game because they won that game.
Got Jackie Franchuli on the line from Rivals Gators territory. Join her and the rest of the staff there in Florida football coverage. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please lock it in right here. We're just coming up on 10,000 subscribers. Please subscribe, share the videos, like, and comment. The thing I remember about that game, Jackie, and I'm rarely surprised by a college football result, especially considering two teams that have NFL players on both sides and very close in talent, but because of the hurricane, the venue change, Florida really struggling on offense, not having what most people would consider to be a legit quarterback. LSU didn't have a great vintage LSU team, but they were loaded on defense. I just thought, I remember being surprised that Florida won the game. I thought that LSU was going to win that game. They're at home, just Florida. How are they going to score? And I was a bit surprised by that game, and obviously it was a huge one. And, I still can envision the pileup at the goal line and Florida players jumping and going crazy because, they made the big goal line stand. And I think Darius Geis had taken the football a few times at him and could not get it in. So a big win for Florida right there as they had won 2 consecutive SEC Eastern Division titles with Jim McElwain on the sideline. So we'll flip it, Jackie, to losses. And again, whatever frame of reference you want to make in terms of a deflating loss, a big loss.
I think one of the biggest losses for me was the loss to Georgia on the day that Jim McElwain was fired. I think that weekend, that was 2 years ago, I think that weekend was pretty much the lowest of the low for the Florida program in a long time. And I think the reason why I choose that, it was also because it's a turning point for the program, because they needed to kind of change the culture around the program. So that's why I picked that loss, because that loss was devastating for the program. The team didn't feel like it was focused, because when they were driving to Jacksonville on Friday, during driving to the game on Saturday, they were seeing social media posts about Jim McElwain, if he's going to be fired or not. So mentally, they weren't there. That week leading up to the game was the most chaotic week for me, because we didn't talk about football. We're talking about those death threats on Monday, and it was just the weirdest week to cover Florida football. And then, everything that happened where, Jim McElwain was fired on that Sunday. Everyone knew it was coming, so it was a matter of time. And Florida went on to just win 4 games that year. And then now they're under a new head coach. He's trying to change the culture. There's a new strength and conditioning program. Players are saying it's been a complete 180 from what they experienced earlier. So that's why I picked that one, not because it's in the grand scheme of things in program history, it was one of the worst losses on record. No, I think it's because of that loss, things changed. So I think there's more to it in that loss.
Ever since Urban Meyer lifted this program to basically sustainable heights that it hadn't experienced before, of course, Steve Spurrier won a national championship, and the program was in the top 10, just year after year under Steve Spurrier. Urban Meyer, though, won 2, obviously, in 3 years. Then he leaves, and they almost won a 3rd national championship, came very close in being undefeated, losing to Alabama in the SEC championship game. That then it was just a very odd, not just a downtime for Florida football, but also odd in that Will Muschamp takes over. He has one outstanding season, but it culminates with a bad loss in the Sugar Bowl, and so that's tainted. But it was a really good team that played maybe the toughest schedule in the country and won 11 games. But the rest of his tenure just did not meet expectations. Jim McElwain coaches them to 2 division championships, but they're given little credit because the division's supposedly down, and I believe that's a fair assessment for the most part. They get blasted most of those years by Florida State at the end, which of course doesn't count against the conference schedule. They had already wrapped up a spot in Atlanta, and then they can't compete with Alabama in the SEC championship games. Although one of those years with defense and special teams, they managed to hang around for most of the game and make it interesting to a certain extent. And then it flips over to Dan Mullen here, and there's a lot of hope going forward based on his track record and just the talent base and what the resources are.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's the one thing is that, Florida does have so much resource just by being where they are, geography. If you just put like a dot in Gainesville and you have like a 5-hour radius around it, they have so much talent within 5 hours. Don't forget, you can go to Atlanta in 5 hours. You have all those kids in Georgia. You have all those kids in Jacksonville, all those kids in Tampa, in Orlando. Miami. So they have everything there. So that's why it's so, when you look back under those other 2 regimes and see what Muschamp and McElwain wasn't able to accomplish, you're like, why? Why weren't they able to get those kids in? And why weren't they able to have that continued success that people at Florida expect?
We deliver some Florida football talk here with Jackie Franchuli from Gators territory on Rivals here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. You can help support the channel by just simply grabbing the Amazon link down in the description section of any video, and certainly this one, and just use it to do your regular Amazon shopping. Doesn't cost you a penny more. Also, like, comment, subscribe, and share the videos as well. So it being May, and as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we're just opening up the topic book. And the next one that comes to mind that I've thrown out there for a number of writers and broadcasters would be players. In the players category of, let's look at the current team heading into 2019, who you think the best player on the team is.
I don't even think about that, Mark. It's CJ Henderson. The corner, I think he's one of the best defenders on the team. I think he's one of the best players on the team. He's a really hard-nosed guy. His work ethic is really, really good. He just kind of stays clean, keeps his nose to the ground. He works really, really hard. He's not the most vocal guy. I think when we get him to interviews, I think if he speaks more than 20 words, I think he had a good day during the interview. But he's a very, very good kid, and he's just such a talented corner. Defensive coordinator Todd Grantham has said in a lot of his interviews that CJ Henderson is probably one of the best corners he's ever coached in his career. And that's saying a lot. Todd Grantham has coached a lot of good players, both in the NFL and college football. And you see it on every Saturday. Henderson is rarely out of position, and they don't really like to throw balls at him. There's a reason why they don't like it. It's because he's that good. And I think this year he's going to have a really, really good season. He's expected to have a really, really good season, especially with Marco Wilson expected to come back opposite him. The secondary is going to be really tough for anyone facing Florida, and it's because of CJ Henderson. Now, the one thing is, too, I do think he's one of the top prospects for the next NFL draft as well. So I would be shocked if he wasn't in any of those mock drafts in the top 20 coming up for next year. I think CJ Henderson is prime for a first-round pick if he does well, as we expect this upcoming season.
So, Jackie, if we back this up, covering the 4 seasons, going into a 4th season that you've covered the team, whatever criteria you want to throw on it, NFL draft prospectus, or just being a best college player, who do you think's been the best player?
I actually would probably pick like Quincy Wilson, Mark Wilson's older brother. I liked covering him and Jalen Tabor, the both DBs. I was lucky enough to cover Jalen Tabor's recruitment, because before I left to cover Florida, my area that I covered was the DMV and Virginia area. So Jalen Tabor is from that area. So I covered him while he was a recruit as well. So those two guys were always so great to talk to during the recruiting process. And they did such a good job when they moved to college football and how they transitioned to the speed of the game. And I would say that a lot of Florida's struggles offensively wasn't shown on paper because their defense was doing so well. They're able to create scoring opportunities on defense because of those guys in the secondary. So that's the reason why I picked them as some of the best players I've covered in my last 4 years.
So those are best players. Is there a distinction between maybe best players, and even though you're a neutral journalist, maybe just players that are fun to watch, or favorite players because of interactions with them, or whatever the criteria, favorite player or players?
Yeah, so I always think best players and favorite players are a little bit different. Like Kadarius Toney is probably one of my favorite players currently. I wouldn't say he's the best player on the team, but he's certainly the most exciting player on the team to watch. Kadarius Toney is not your prototypical wide receiver, and I think Dan Mullen has realized that when he got here. I think Dan Mullen didn't really know what he was going to do with Kadarius Toney. Mullen seems like the type of guy that likes to have control in a lot of situations, and Kadarius Toney is the type of player that you can't really give him a playbook to, per se. He kind of wings it a little bit, and that's kind of hard for a coach to relinquish control like that. But Kadarius Toney is, there's a joke. Kadarius Toney would do Kadarius Toney things. He would just get the ball and will try to work as his magic and try to go down the field. So I think he's one of the most exciting players. And I think fans do love Kadarius Toney. I think he's one of those guys that has a lot of versatility. He showed that in the spring game by throwing a ball to Felipe Franks. So I think he's one guy that's very exciting. But in the case for during my career here at Florida, I actually will pick Jalen Tabor and Quincy Wilson again as some of my favorite players, just because of their characters. They're really funny to talk to during interviews. I don't know if anyone remembers right before the Tennessee game. I think it was 2000 and gosh, I think it was 16, maybe. Yeah, I think it was 2016. Quincy Wilson brings, "Have you ever seen a duck pull a truck?" Quote, and Jalen Tabor's always want to also make fun of things and just have a laugh during interviews. It's always fun when you get those characters, and when they take a normal interview setting and just makes it fun. So that's why I picked those two as my favorite players as well.
I remember that comment. Now I'm not remembering how that was directed. Tennessee Volunteers, a duck, a truck. What was...
I honestly don't understand how that manifested in his head, but it was because someone asked about if Tennessee could beat Florida, and someone's like, "Have you ever seen a duck pull a truck?" That was his answer. So yeah, it was like, I don't know how someone just comes up with that, but it definitely made the interviews entertaining.
Yeah, I guess the job just being a little bit too heavy, a little too weighty for the duck. That's trying to come up with the biggest mismatch, I guess he could come up with. Hey, it works.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that for some reason. But then that's the reason, because who else is going to say that, and where else have you heard that? Jackie Franchuli on the line, Gators territory on Rivals. That's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. So if you're coming across this for the first time, or maybe you've checked out a couple videos, 7,000 videos, we deliver the best in discussion, debate, and analysis on a daily basis with the likes of Jackie and other top writers, broadcasters, bloggers, and analysis from myself. We're doing schedule rankings. I'm not going to get to Florida in quite some time, because I started at 70 in the Power 5, Jackie, and I'm working all the way up to number 1. So Florida will be much on that high end of the difficulty of the schedule, no question about that.